Maria had always believed she was living the dream. Her marriage to David seemed perfect in every way. They had known each other since college, and their relationship had grown stronger with every passing year. The way David looked at her, the way he made her laugh, and the way they shared quiet moments together. Everything felt like it was meant to be. They had a beautiful home, a lovely routine, and a life full of joy. Maria couldn't imagine a day without him. He was her rock, her best friend, and the love of her life. Every evening, they would sit together on the couch, watching their favorite TV shows, sharing stories about their day. David had always been the charming, attentive husband. He was always there for her, always listened, and always seemed to know exactly what she needed. It was the kind of love that most people dreamed of. Maria often thought to herself how lucky she was to have found someone like him. Their life together felt like a fairy tale. But lately, things had started to feel off. At first, it was little things, almost unnoticeable. David was often out of the house for longer hours, saying it was work-related. He would come home later than usual, looking tired but never explaining where he had been. Sometimes, he would be distant, his mind elsewhere. Maria tried to brush it off, telling herself that it was just stress from his job. He had always been dedicated to his career, and with the pressure at work, it was only natural for him to be a little more preoccupied. Still, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. She would ask him about his day, and he would give her vague answers, deflecting any attempts to get him to open up. There were nights when she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was imagining things. She trusted David. She truly did, but her gut kept telling her that there was something more to his behavior. It wasn't like him to be so secretive, to shut her out. One evening, as she was cleaning their bedroom, something caught her eye. It was a small, leather-bound notebook that she had never seen before. It was tucked away at the back of his drawer, hidden under a stack of old papers. Maria felt a strange curiosity rise in her chest. She had never gone through his things, respecting his privacy. But something about this notebook made her pause. There was no reason for him to hide it so carefully if it was just something trivial. She picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. It was strange to think that after all these years, there might be something about her husband that she didn't know. But as she opened the notebook, her eyes widened in shock. It wasn't a personal journal like she had expected. Instead, it was filled with codes, strange numbers, and cryptic symbols. There was no explanation for any of it. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. What could this mean? Why would David have something like this? She quickly put the notebook back in the drawer, her mind racing. It could have been nothing, right? She could have easily misunderstood it. Maybe it was something from his work, a project, a code for a game, or some sort of complicated business thing. But deep down, she knew that wasn't the case. This felt different. This wasn't something she could ignore. The next few days were filled with tension. Maria couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen. She kept trying to tell herself it was nothing, but the more she thought about it, the more she felt like she was missing something important. Every time David came home, he seemed more distant, more consumed by something she couldn't understand. His answers to her questions were quick and vague, and his eyes always seemed to avoid hers, as if he was hiding something. Maria's mind began to spiral. Could David be hiding something from her? It seemed impossible. She knew him so well. They shared everything. But as the days passed, her doubts grew stronger. The perfect marriage she had believed in was starting to crack, and the fear of what she might find kept her up at night. She tried to push the thought away, but it wouldn't leave her. The sense of unease was growing, and Maria couldn't help but wonder if her husband, the man she trusted with everything, was hiding something dark and dangerous. Her thoughts raced as she tried to make sense of it all. Why would David hide things from her? What could he possibly be involved in that he hadn't told her about? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than she could ever have imagined. And as much as she tried to push it out of her mind, a nagging voice kept whispering, What if David wasn't the man she thought he was? Every glance, every word, every moment with him now felt loaded with hidden meaning. Maria could feel the walls closing in, but she couldn't bring herself to confront him. She didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to face the possibility that her life with David might be built on a lie. But deep down, she knew that sooner or later, she would have to find the truth. The mystery of the notebook was just the beginning, and she was about to uncover something that would change everything. Maria couldn't sleep that night. The notebook had disturbed her more than she cared to admit. She tossed and turned, her mind racing with questions she wasn't ready to face. What had David been hiding from her? What was he involved in that required such secrecy? The more she thought about it, the more her thoughts tangled together, forming a web of confusion and fear. The next day, she decided to take action. She couldn't just keep wondering and hoping it was all nothing. It wasn't like her to avoid the truth. Maria had always prided herself on being honest, on trusting the people around her. But this felt different. Her husband, the man she had built her life with, was acting strange in ways she couldn't explain, and she needed to know why. While David was at work, Maria decided to do something she'd never done before. She would search his study. The notebook was just the beginning, and she needed answers. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something hidden in that room, something she needed to find. Her heart raced as she entered his study. The room was quiet, almost too quiet. It was a place where David usually spent hours working, yet it felt foreign to her now. She glanced around, her eyes scanning the shelves and drawers, looking for anything that could explain his recent behavior. The desk was neat, almost too neat, as if he had been organizing everything to keep it from her. She pulled open the drawers, one by one, feeling a mix of guilt and determination. Each drawer contained only the usual paperwork, business files, invoices, and a few personal letters. But then, in the very back of the last drawer, she spotted something. A small black folder, carefully tucked away behind some old receipts. Maria pulled it out, her hands shaking as she opened it. Inside the folder were photos. They were not the kind of photos one would expect to find in a family album. These were blurry, grainy images of men in suits, standing in dark alleys and at airports. Some were of people Maria didn't recognize, and others were images of David, his face partially obscured but unmistakable. It was clear from the pictures that David had been involved in something serious, something dangerous. Her mind was racing, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. David? A part of her wanted to believe there was some logical explanation, but the more she looked at the photos, the more she realized that what she was seeing was undeniable. He was involved in something secret, something far beyond what she had ever imagined. Her husband, the man she thought she knew better than anyone, was hiding a life from her, a life filled with lies, mystery, and danger. She couldn't stay in the study any longer. The walls seemed to close in on her as she tried to process everything. She closed the folder quickly and shoved it back into the drawer, her hands trembling. Maria knew she had to confront him. She couldn't keep going like this, pretending that everything was okay when her entire world was falling apart. David came home late that evening, just like the nights before. He smiled at her, his usual warm smile, but Maria could see it now, the subtle shift in his eyes. He was hiding something, and it wasn't just about his long hours at work. Her stomach twisted with anxiety as she prepared herself to ask the one question she had been dreading. "David," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "There's something I need to talk to you about." He glanced at her, his smile fading slightly. "What is it, Maria?" She took a deep breath, her heart racing as she tried to keep calm. "I found something today. Something I don't understand." She paused, waiting for him to respond, but he just stood there, silently watching her. "What's going on, David? What is this life you're hiding from me?" David's face went pale, and for the first time, Maria saw something in his eyes that made her stomach drop, a flicker of fear. He didn't answer her right away, and that silence felt like a loud accusation. The tension in the room was unbearable as she waited for him to speak. Finally, he took a deep breath and slowly walked over to her, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I never wanted you to find out this way," he muttered. Maria's heart pounded. "Find out what? What is all of this, David? What are you really doing when you're not here?" He raised his eyes to meet hers, and in that moment, Maria saw the truth. It wasn't just about work or late nights. It was bigger than that. "Maria," he began slowly, his voice trained. "I've been living a double life. I'm not just a businessman. I've been working as an operative, a spy." Her breath caught in her throat. The words didn't make sense. She felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. A spy. Her husband. It was unbelievable, yet here he was, confessing it in front of her. The life she had known was a lie. "I didn't want to tell you," he continued. "I wanted to protect you. But I can't keep this from you anymore. It's been getting too dangerous. People are looking for me, and I'm afraid they might come after you too." Maria stood frozen, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. Her husband was a spy, living a life filled with danger, secrecy, and lies. And now, that world was crashing into hers. The man she had trusted with everything had been hiding the truth all along. The room seemed to close in on her, and Maria struggled to breathe. What was she supposed to do now? Maria's mind was racing, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't process what David had just told her. A spy. It sounded like something out of a movie, something that couldn't possibly be real. But as she looked at him, she saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't lying. This wasn't some crazy fantasy. Her husband, the man she had spent years loving and trusting, had been living a completely different life. A life filled with danger, lies, and secrets. For a moment, Maria felt like the room was spinning. The world she had known had shattered in an instant. How had she not known? How had she missed all the signs? All the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the odd behavior. Now it all made sense, but it felt too much to bear. She took a step back, her hand on her chest, trying to calm the panic rising inside her. "Why didn't you tell me, David?" Her voice shook, betraying the hurt and confusion she was feeling. "Why keep me in the dark? All this time, I thought we were building a life together. A life I could trust." David's face tightened, as if he was struggling to hold back his own emotions. "I wanted to, Maria. I really did. But I couldn't risk it. I couldn't risk you getting hurt. I knew once you knew, there would be no going back. It's dangerous, and I couldn't put you in that world. I thought I could protect you from all of it." Maria felt a tear slip down her cheek as the weight of his words hit her. He had kept this from her to protect her. Or was it to protect himself? She didn't know. The confusion and pain were overwhelming. She wanted to scream, to demand answers to every question running through her mind. But instead, she just stood there, shaking her head, unable to find the words. "I don't understand," she whispered. "All these years, was everything a lie?" David reached out to her, but she took a step back, not wanting to be touched, not knowing if she could trust him anymore. "No," he said quickly, his voice desperate. "Maria, everything we had, everything I've ever said to you, it was real. But this other life, it's something I had to keep from you. I never wanted you involved in it." Maria felt her heart twist. She had always thought of their marriage as perfect, as something unbreakable. But now, standing here, she realized how fragile it all was. "And now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens now, David? How do we go on from here? Can we go on from here?" David's face grew dark. "I don't know, but things are getting worse. There are people involved in this, dangerous people, and they know about you now. I can't protect you from them anymore. I need to get you out of here, Maria, before it's too late." Her heart dropped into her stomach. The reality of the situation was sinking in. She wasn't just hurt or confused. She was in danger. All of this wasn't just about her husband's lies. There were real threats now, real people who would hurt her to get to him. She had never imagined anything like this. A part of her wanted to run, to escape from everything, to pretend this wasn't happening. But there was no escape. David was right. There was no going back. She felt the tears threatening to spill again that forced them back. "So, what do we do now?" she asked, trying to sound strong, trying to make sense of the situation. David was silent for a moment, his gaze locked on hers. "I need you to trust me, Maria. I need you to come with me. I'll take you somewhere safe, far away from all of this. I'll make sure you're protected." Maria's mind was spinning. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but could she? Could she trust the man who had lied to her for so long? Could she trust someone who had been living a life of secrecy, who had hidden the most important parts of himself from her? "I don't know if I can," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear and uncertainty. "How can I trust you now, David? After everything?" David looked broken. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've betrayed your trust, but I'm begging you. Please, let me fix this. Please, let me keep you safe." For a moment, Maria stood there, staring at the man she had once trusted with her entire life. Could she forgive him? Could she take a leap of faith and follow him into the unknown, trusting that he would protect her? She didn't know the answer. All she knew was that the world she had once known was gone, and now nothing would ever be the same again. Maria didn't know what to think. The emotions swirling inside her were too overwhelming, too powerful to ignore. One moment, she was questioning everything she knew about her life with David. And the next, she was faced with a terrifying truth, a truth that not only shattered her trust, but also put her life in danger. She stood there, frozen, as David's pleading eyes begged for her understanding. Could she trust him again after everything? Could she follow him into a world she didn't even understand? She had to make a choice. The silence between them stretched on, heavy and tense. Maria's heart pounded in her chest, but in that moment, she knew she couldn't stay in the same place any longer. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. The truth had been revealed, and with it, the weight of a future she wasn't prepared for. David's voice broke the silence again, his words trembling with urgency. "Maria, please, we don't have time. If you don't come with me now, you're in danger. They know about you. They know you're connected to me, and they won't stop until they find you. Please, we have to go." Maria looked at him, trying to read the desperation in his eyes. She could see the fear, the guilt, the worry in his expression. It wasn't the face of a man who had lied for years without reason. This wasn't a man who had simply kept secrets for selfish gain. This was someone who had been dragged into a world far beyond his control, and now, it seemed, that world was about to crash down on them both. Her mind raced. She thought of the life she had once taken for granted, the calm, peaceful routine they had shared. Everything seemed so distant now, so unreal. Could she leave it all behind? Could she walk away from the life she had known, from the comfort and security that had once defined her world? But then the truth hit her again. There was no going back. She had already seen too much. There was no ignoring the danger that loomed ahead. David wasn't just hiding things for the sake of secrecy. He was trying to protect her. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that he was right. There were people out there who would hurt her if they knew she was connected to him. The threats were real, and time was running out. Taking a deep breath, Maria made up her mind. She couldn't stay in the life they had built together. Not anymore. The safety, the normalcy, all of it felt like a lie. It wasn't real. The danger was too close, and the only way to protect herself was to leave it all behind. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll go with you. I'll trust you, David. But if you're lying to me now, if you're hiding something else, I swear I'll never forgive you." David's eyes softened, and he stepped closer to her, his hand gently taking hers. "I promise, Maria. I swear I'll protect you. We're in this together now. And no matter what happens, I won't let anything happen to you." Maria nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and fear wash over her. She didn't know what they were walking into, but she knew that staying wasn't an option. The world she had known was gone, and now, the only thing that mattered was surviving what came next. David led her quickly through the house, grabbing a small bag with essentials, his movements sharp and purposeful. They had to move fast. Maria's mind was still reeling, but she focused on keeping up, on staying calm, and not letting the panic take over. As they stepped outside, David quickly glanced around, as if checking for anyone who might be watching. The streets seemed strangely empty, eerily quiet. But Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that someone, somewhere, was already onto them. "Where are we going?" Maria asked, her voice shaky. "I have a safe place," David replied. "It's a few hours away. We'll be safe there for now. But we need to get there fast. We don't have time to waste." Maria nodded, even though her thoughts were still tangled with doubt. They got into their car, the engine purring to life as David sped off down the road. The further they drove, the more distant their home felt, and the more uncertain the future became. But in that moment, Maria knew there was no turning back. She had chosen to trust David, and now her survival depended on it. As the city lights faded behind them, Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of unease settle over her. She had never imagined her life would take this turn. She had never imagined that one day her husband's secrets would lead them down a path filled with danger, fear, and uncertainty. But one thing was clear: her life was no longer in her hands. She had been thrust into a world of spies, lies, and threats beyond anything she could have ever prepared for. And the worst part, she had no idea how far this danger would go or how deep the lies ran. All she knew now was that the road ahead was dark, and she could only hope that David was telling the truth, that he really could protect her from the storm that was closing in on them both. Hours passed as the cars sped down winding roads, and the world outside seemed to blur into a dark haze. Maria barely noticed the changing scenery. Her mind was consumed by one thought: how had everything turned upside down so quickly? She sat in the passenger seat, her hands tightly gripping her purse, her stomach tied in knots. She glanced at David, who kept his eyes focused on the road, his jaw clenched, as if deep in thought. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something much darker. A man on the run, trying to protect the one person he cared about the most. The silence between them was deafening. Every once in a while, Maria would glance at him, wondering if the man she thought she knew was still there, hidden behind the facade of this stranger. A spy. Her mind couldn't fully comprehend the reality of it. He was involved in something dangerous, something far beyond their quiet life together. And now, she was a part of it too. "David," Maria spoke softly, her voice shaking. "Are you sure we're safe? Are we really going to make it out of this?" David's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He glanced at her for a moment, his face unreadable. "I'm doing everything I can to make sure we're safe, Maria. You need to trust me. The people who are after me, they won't stop until they get what they want." His words were sharp, and Maria could hear the fear hidden beneath the surface. He wasn't just trying to protect her. He was trying to protect both of them. But who were these people, and how far would they go to find him? More importantly, how far would they go to hurt her? Maria felt her chest tighten, the air around her feeling thick with anxiety. What happens when we get to this safe place? Is it really going to be safe, or are we just running? She asked, her voice full of doubt. David exhaled heavily. "It's not just about running. We'll figure out what's next when we get there. I'll contact some people I trust. But right now, we need to get you to safety. That's the priority." She nodded, though her mind was still racing. The idea of not knowing what would happen next, of being completely powerless, made her feel nauseous. She had always prided herself on being independent, on being in control of her own life. But now, her entire world was in David's hands, and for the first time in her life, she didn't know if she could trust the man she had built her future with. As the miles passed, the darkness around them deepened. They passed through small towns with barely a soul in sight. Maria tried to keep her thoughts focused, but they kept circling back to the same question. Why hadn't she seen this coming? Was there something she had missed? Had she been so blinded by love that she couldn't see the truth? David broke the silence again. I never wanted this for you, Maria. You didn't sign up for any of this. And I'm sorry. But I can't change the past, and I can't protect you from the consequences of the life I've been living. All I can do is make sure you're safe now. Maria turned to look at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and sorrow. You should have told me, David. We could have figured this out together. We could have fought this together. His expression softened for a moment, but he didn't look at her. I thought I was protecting you by keeping you out of it. I was trying to shield you from a world I didn't want you to be a part of. And now, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, now I'm part of it, aren't I? There's no turning back now, is there? David's silence answered her question. He wasn't denying it. They were in this together now, whether she liked it or not. The danger was real, and it was following them. Maria looked out of the window, watching the dark trees pass by, their shadows stretching across the road. The world outside seemed to be closing in around them, and with each passing minute, the weight of what she had just learned pressed down on her. This was no longer just about their marriage. It was about survival. And as much as she hated to admit it, she had no idea what would happen when they reached their destination. As the car continued to drive into the unknown, Maria's mind raced through every possible outcome. Would they be safe? Would they ever be able to return to the life they had before? Or would they always be looking over their shoulders, wondering if someone was waiting to take them down? The uncertainty was unbearable, and yet all she could do was keep moving forward, one step at a time. The future was no longer something she could plan. It was something she had to survive. David's voice interrupted her thoughts. We're almost there, just a little longer. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know if she was ready for whatever lay ahead, but she knew one thing for sure. The life she once knew was gone, and there was no turning back. As they approached their destination, Maria felt her anxiety grow. The car slowed as they turned down a narrow, desolate road. The trees that lined the path seemed to close in, casting long shadows over the small stretch of dirt. The surroundings felt eerie, like something out of a suspenseful thriller, and Maria couldn't shake the growing sense of dread in her chest. Was this really a safe place, or had David led her straight into even more danger? David glanced at her, sensing her tension. It's going to be okay, he reassured her, but his voice lacked the confidence it once had. His eyes were sharp, scanning the dark roads, constantly on edge. She could see the strain in his face. He wasn't just trying to protect her anymore. He was trying to keep both of them alive. The car came to a stop in front of a small weathered cabin. It looked abandoned at first glance. No lights on, no sign of life. Maria couldn't help but feel a knot form in her stomach. It was far from the place she had imagined for safety. The idea of being isolated in a remote cabin, with no one around, made her feel vulnerable and exposed. What if this was all a trap? What if David wasn't the person he had led her to believe? David parked the car and turned to her. We're here. It's safe inside. Maria didn't answer right away. She just stared at the cabin, unsure of what to do. Every instinct inside her told her to run, but where could she go? Who could she trust? Her mind swirled with unanswered questions, and the uncertainty of it all made her want to break down. But she knew she had to trust him. David had brought her this far, and she couldn't lose faith in him now. She had to believe that this was their only chance to survive. David stepped out of the car and moved to the cabin's door. He quickly unlocked it, glancing over his shoulder to make sure they weren't being followed. Maria hesitated for a moment, then finally followed him inside. her heart hammering in her chest. The cabin was small but cozy. A fire flickered in the corner of the room, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the cold, fear-filled air between them. David motioned for her to sit on the couch, then moved to the small kitchen area. Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness wash over her as she sank into the worn cushions. This wasn't how she had imagined her life. Her mind kept flashing to the life she had once known, a life filled with routine and comfort, and she wondered if she would ever get it back. David returned with a bottle of water, his eyes still scanning the room. He set the bottle down in front of her, then sat beside her, leaning forward as if preparing for something serious. "We need to talk," he said quietly, his voice tinged with urgency. "I don't know how long we can stay here. There are people out there looking for us. People who won't stop until they find us." Maria nodded, though her mind was still struggling to catch up. "What happens next, David? What's the plan?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I have a contact who can help, but it's going to take some time. We'll have to lay low here for a while, stay under the radar. I'll be in touch with him soon, but we need to stay quiet, stay hidden. If they know where we are, we won't be safe for long." The weight of his words settled heavily in the room. The idea of being stuck in a cabin with no way out, no idea of what was coming next, was terrifying. Maria's mind raced with the endless possibilities. What if they couldn't stay hidden? What if they were found? The thought of those dangerous people coming after her, coming after both of them, was almost too much to bear. David must have sensed her rising panic because he placed a hand on hers. "I know you're scared, Maria, but you have to understand something. I'm doing everything I can to protect you. I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." But Maria wasn't sure if she could believe him anymore. How could she, after all the secrets, all the lies? She wanted to trust him, to believe that he truly cared for her and was doing everything to protect her. But the doubt still lingered. If David had kept so much from her, how could she be sure that this place was truly safe? How could she be sure that he wasn't leading her into even greater danger? She pulled her hand away from his gently and looked down at her lap, struggling to find the right words. "I don't know if I can do this, David. I don't know if I can keep living like this. Running, hiding. I don't even know who you are anymore." David's face tightened, and she could see the pain in his eyes. "I'm still the man you married, Maria. I'm still the man you loved. But this is bigger than us. I didn't want this for you, but now we're in it together. I need you to trust me. Please." Maria felt the tension in her chest rise again. The desperation in his voice made her want to believe him, but the fear she felt was overwhelming. Was she truly safe here, or was this just another dangerous step in a long chain of lies and betrayal? As the night stretched on, Maria sat in silence, her thoughts spinning in every direction. The fire crackled in the corner of the room, a small comfort in the darkness. But no matter how much she tried to focus on the warmth, the fear never quite left her. The road ahead was uncertain, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The morning came too quickly, the harsh light of day piercing through the cabin's small windows. Maria barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she was haunted by the shadows of danger, the faces of people she didn't know, yet knew would do anything to get to her. David was awake before her, already moving around the cabin, quietly preparing for whatever the next step might be. His movements were quick and purposeful, but there was an air of anxiety about him. Maria watched him for a moment, wondering what was going on in his mind. Did he really know what they were up against? Did he really know how much danger they were in? David turned and caught her looking at him. His eyes softened, but there was still a certain unease there. "We need to get ready to move," he said in a low voice. "It won't be long before someone comes looking for us. The longer we stay here, the more at risk we are." Maria nodded, her stomach tightening. The idea of leaving the only place that had seemed somewhat safe was terrifying. Where would they go next? What would they do? Her thoughts were a whirlwind, But one thing was clear. She couldn't stay here, and David was right. The danger wasn't going to wait. David grabbed a small bag from the corner of the room, pulling out a few things they would need. He seemed calmer now, more in control, but Maria could see the toll it was taking on him. This wasn't the man she had married, the one who had always been so steady, so sure of himself. This was someone different, someone caught up in a world he couldn't escape, a world that now had her trapped too. As David packed, Maria stood up, her legs shaky, and made her way to the small window. She peered out, but all she could see was the endless stretch of trees, the same woods they had driven through the night before. There was nothing familiar here, nothing that made her feel safe. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. "David," she called out softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did we get here? How did everything change so fast?" He paused, the weight of her question hanging in the air between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I never meant for you to be dragged into this, Maria. I never wanted any of this for you. But now I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I can." Maria turned to face him, her heart pounding. "You have to fix this, David. You have to find a way to make it right. I can't live like this. I can't keep running from something I don't even understand." David's face softened, but there was a look of defeat in his eyes. "I wish I could give you answers. I wish I could take you back to the life we had before all of this started. But I can't, Maria. What's coming, what's already here, it's bigger than both of us. And I don't know if there's a way out. All I know is that I'll do anything to keep you safe, no matter what." Maria's breath caught in her throat as she looked at him. The fear in his eyes was real. He wasn't just trying to protect her. He was trying to protect both of them from something that was bigger than either of them could have imagined. She stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation crashing down on her. She was caught between the man she loved and the terrifying reality that had consumed their lives. She had always known life wasn't perfect, but this was something she had never prepared for. Spies, danger, lies, everything was spinning out of control. David stepped toward her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "We don't have a choice anymore. We can't go back to the life we had. We have to face what's coming together. And I promise, no matter what happens, I won't let anything happen to you. We'll get through this." Tears filled Maria's eyes as she looked at him, torn between wanting to believe him and the fear that still gripped her heart. "I don't know if I can keep going like this, David. I don't know if I can trust you anymore." David's expression faltered, and for a moment, it seemed as though he would break. But he held his ground, his resolve firm. "I know I've lost your trust, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But please, trust me now. For both of our sakes." Maria's heart ached as she looked at him. She had no answers, no way of knowing what was coming next. But she knew one thing for sure. She was in this with him now, whether she liked it or not. With a deep breath, Maria wiped her eyes and nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll trust you. But we have to get out of here, David. We have to keep moving." David gave a small, relieved smile, but the worry in his eyes didn't fade. They had no idea what was waiting for them, what dangers lay ahead, but they were about to find out. With a final glance around the cabin, David grabbed the bag and motioned for Maria to follow him. As they stepped out into the cold morning air, the world felt different. The safety they had once known was gone, and now they were on the run, their lives uncertain. But there was no turning back. They had crossed a line, and all they could do now was survive what was coming for them.